think we might just have time to find to get a full rundown of the runners and riders from Breda before we let her go. Anyway, it's 9 o'clock. This is Rachel Burden live from St Peter's Square in Vatican City in Rome, and this is your call. Should popes quit? Pope Benedict says he doesn't have the strength of mind and body to continue in the job. He's become the first pope in 600 years and only the second ever to resign the post. The former Archbishop of Westminster, Cardinal Cormac Murphy O'Connor, says it is the right call.
Well, it's a very brave decision to do something new after, as you rightly said, 600 years. It's a very, very brave decision to take. And it's become much more demanding, I think, over the past 30, 40 years.
Is this a pragmatic decision by an old man, or by its very nature does the role require a degree of suffering, self-sacrifice? He is regarded as God's ordained on earth. Has he done a good job as Pope, or do scandals in the church, child abuse, Vati leaks make this the right time for him to go? Should popes quit? Give me a call, 0500 909 693. You can tweet us as well at BBC 5 Live. You are with 5 Live from the BBC. I'm Rachel Hodges has the news. Good morning. You're listening to BBC Radio 5 Live. It's your call. It's around about 6 minutes past 10 here in Rome, 6 minutes past 9 back in the UK. I'm standing right in the heart of Vatican City in St Peter's Square, looking across to St Peter's Basilica this morning, majestic with the blue sky behind it. Crowds of tourists now here thronging in front of the Basilica. Lots of television trucks and journalists around as well, gathering here, collecting response to the news that Pope Benedict XVI says he intends to resign. This will officially happen on February the 28th, but not that far from where I am standing now. He is presumably waking up, having his breakfast, reading over the papers. He reads the papers every morning, we are told, looking at some of the reaction to this news, perhaps contemplating what his life will be like now, having resigned the papacy, the first pope to do so in 600 years, and many people saying this is a very significant moment for the Catholic Church, for the papacy, and could have implications for the 1 billion Catholics, baptised Catholics right around the world. But to many people it will matter very little at all. And the question for you this morning is, should popes quit? What do you think? Do you think he's had a degree of foresight here to recognise that his time has come, that he has been as of much use as he can be, that his physical and mental health is now really an impairment to him getting on and doing the job properly? Or do you see the role slightly differently? Do you think that perhaps even the fact that it's almost like any other job, if you resign, can you be sacked, that it demythologises the whole role of the Pope, the mysticism surrounding him? Is it a complete irrelevance to you? How do you think the Vatican should proceed from here? How do you respond to this? Is it the right decision? Should popes quit? 0500 909 693. Do give me a call on this morning. Lots of people already to talk to about it. We begin with Austin Ivory, who is Director of Catholic Voices. Morning, Austin.
Good morning.
Very nice to have you with us. And Matt in Derby as well, and Tony in Preston. Morning, Matt and Tony.
Good morning. Hello.
Thank you for calling in. Austin Ivory, first of all, from your perspective, do you think that Pope Benedict XVI has made the right decision?
I do. I think it was a brave and a correct decision. He rightly perceives that the modern papacy demands a lot of global travel. In an age of global media, you need to be responsive to crises as they develop. And I think he's looked at his failing health and he said, right now he can just about do it, but down the line it's going to get very, very hard. And so he's taken this decision I think at a well-judged moment, and by doing so he allows the process for the election of a new pope to carry on as if actually he had died. On the 28th of February he'll step down, he'll retreat into a monastery, and he won't overshadow the process of a selection of a successor. So it takes us into unprecedented territory, but I think he's thought it out properly, and I think it's a decision taken in conscience.
Well, you say it won't overshadow, but there is a bit of an issue here, because he will still effectively be present in Vatican City. He has a very strong ideological position, and many people perceive that he has driven the Church's agenda to the right, if you like. And is it not very difficult for whoever follows him to move the Church in a different direction when he is is still there, a living Pope if resigned, with his cardinals very much in charge.
Well, first of all, I don't think it's true to say that he would in any way inhibit the church's future direction. I think it's actually wrong to talk about the Pope taking the church to the right, and I think it's false to talk about his successor would take the church in a different direction. That's not quite the way it works. Pope Benedict built on the papacy of John Paul II, and the next Pope will build on the legacy of Pope Benedict. And the cardinals, when they gather, will be looking at what Pope Benedict has constructed these last 7-8 years, and they'll be looking to build on that. So, it's true. I know it's tempting to see him as a conservative and a traditionalist and so on. The next Pope will be as well, and I think we need to get away from these labels. That's not helpful.
Right. Okay, Matt in Derby, should popes quit?
Good morning. I don't know whether they should quit or not. I think this one should be standing trial rather than being allowed to quit. I think with everything that seems to have happened with his previous role, where he was supposedly the person in charge of within the Catholic Church to look into the child sex cases with priests and other people, and nothing was done. In fact, they actively covered it up. I think if it was anyone else, he'd be in a court of law at the minute.
Can I respond to
Tony
that?
and Preston, how do you see it? Well, we'll come back to you in a moment, Austin. Tony and Preston.
Yeah, I mean, what the speaker just said before about the child sex abuse case, I think things like this need to be being brought up. I mean, it's an absolute scandal what's gone on in the Catholic Church over the years, over the centuries, really. But considering it has so much power in today and it's held up in such high esteem, I mean, I'd quite like to know what goes on at the Vatican Bank. I'm sure that's full of scandal. I read recently that the Vatican City, of course, it's its own country, a bit of a weird one, a bit like the City of London, but it apparently has the highest rate of crime per head of population of any country. So, as I say, I just think the church is full, it's corrupt and is rotten to its core in many ways, and is very irrelevant. I think it causes a lot of trouble in the world. His recent comments on the Muslim, on Muhammad, well, I mean, how ill-judged was that? Just ridiculous. Very conveniently forgetting the Crusades, many things.
And before we come back to you, Austin, Kirk in Doncaster, good morning. Should popes quit?
Agree absolutely with the two gentlemen that have just spoke just before me, that I can't believe the comments with regards to how much pressure that the Pope must have been under and how brave he had to be to make this decision. Why is it any different to being in any position of, whether private or public sector across the world, really? Why is it so precious? Why is anybody under so much pressure? Why do people have to effectively carry out this role until their deathbed? Surely if you have somebody in such an influential decision, you don't want them making decisions under pressure when they are old and ill and potentially senile. I just don't get it. And also, I totally agree with the two gentlemen before again, with regards to, how much has gone on with the church recently over the past few years with regards to the paedophilia cases, etc. I heard a gentleman earlier on state that God is always within church and always aware of everything that goes on within church. And Nicky Campbell made a very good point that, hang on a minute, a lot of bad has happened in the church recently, so that surely questions where God stands. Now, I know a lot of people do have the stock answer of God works in mysterious ways, or the devil makes his way into the church sometimes, but that surely is just an excuse and a way to get out.
Austin Ivory, respond then to Matt and Tony.
Where do I
and
begin?
Kirk.
Remind me if there's something I haven't answered. First of all, on the crime rate, well, you've got to imagine there are millions of visitors to the Vatican every year. So every time a pocket is picked, that gets recorded as a crime within Vatican City State. So that explains that one. It's a tiny area, and therefore you'd expect it to have a relatively high proportion of crime because of all the visitors. On the very serious allegations about that this Pope in some way did nothing or even covered up clerical sex abuse, I'm afraid that's just simply wrong. I know a lot about this as a journalist, and many stories about it. This Pope took the lead when he was president of the Congregation of the Doctrine of the Faith in making sure that cases were dealt with at a local level. In 2001, he demanded that all cases were copied to him so he could ensure that action happened. He reformed a number of important areas of canon law to ensure that priests were laicized who had been convicted or convincingly accused. He has also demanded that Bishops' Conference around the world implement guidelines which ensure mandatory reporting. Not everything in the Catholic Church is yet solved on this question, but I believe Pope Benedict has done more than anybody could have done from the Vatican to ensure that it has done, and history will show that. Now, what were the other ones?
Would anyone? I heard someone else trying to come back in there. Who was that?
This whole idea that the Pope has done more than anyone to.
Well, I'm afraid it's just true. It's a historical record.
Listen to yourself. So if you don't mind me speaking, that'd be great. How the idea that this Pope has done more than anyone to help the situation with child sex abuse cases. Even if you think about one child in the world, all these people have been put up with all this stuff that's been going on in the Catholic Church for years, and the Pope has done absolutely nothing. If you actually look into it at all and see that he was in charge of the whole area within the Catholic Church that was supposed to investigate this thing, you think in that position he would have blown it wide open. If he truly believed in some sort of God, he wouldn't think about his position, he wouldn't think about anything else. You think about a small child having to be put up by some horrible old man as a priest, and he didn't do any of that. And if he was anything but the Pope at the moment, he would be investigated and he'd be in jail. But you know for a fact that won't happen.
Well, this is just completely preposterous. Now, I'm afraid it's just nonsense. And from 2001, when he took over responsibility, every single Friday he reviewed hundreds and hundreds of cases, and the figures are all out there, and he ensured that they were dealt with. I mean, and there were a number of reforms made to law to ensure that they were dealt with. It's just complete nonsense what you've just said. And history and the historians are already beginning to say, actually, when you look back on it, even though it wasn't always easy before the death of John Paul II, even though some of the reforms that Ratzinger tried to put in place were blocked, as soon as he became Pope, he finished off that process of reform. Just last year, we had a major conference in the Vatican on safeguarding, which again brought together shared best practice. Now the Catholic Church, actually, and of course, there has been a problem with the Catholic Church many years ago in the 70s and the 80s. These issues were not dealt with. They were covered up back then.
There has been a problem.
I thought you weren't going to interrupt me because I wasn't going to interrupt you. 30, 40 years ago, this happened. Those cases, many of them are still coming to light. And of course, back then, they were not properly dealt with, in common with other institutions. But what we can say certainly now is that, at least in the West, the Catholic Church has some exemplary guidelines and is a model of safeguarding.
Matt, come in.
The sad thing is, and the bottom line to all of this is the whole point of this isn't to look after children, isn't to protect God's children, as obviously some of you call them. They're actually just called children. It's just to protect the Pope and the Catholic Church. Well, you're still people. Sorry, you interrupted me.
You're quite right. I should.
You actually should protect the children, and until actually you realise what your responsibility in this world is, which is protecting other people.
Well, I've just listed the ways in which the Church now does that. So I don't see any point in carrying this on. I've listed the ways in which the Church is now an exemplary safeguarding institution. If your caller insists on repeating that the Church does not look after children, then I'm afraid there's not much point in carrying on.
Exactly what you said.
Derby, thank you so much. To Kirk in Doncaster and Tony in Preston as well, Austin Ivory. It is still a very raw issue, not least for the victims of these abuse cases, but also for practicing Catholics around the world, and it will come up in any discussion about the papal succession. Thank you very much for your time. 0500 909 693. Should popes quit? That's the question we have for you this morning. You're listening to BBC Radio 5 Live. The time.
This is 5 Live Breakfast. Your call.
Good morning from BBC Radio 5 Live. You join me in St Peter's Square in Vatican City in Rome this morning, where the sun is out, the sky is blue. Crowds are thronging around at the moment. I'm standing right next to the ice cream van that haven't yet availed of its wares. I hope to before too long. Professor Breda Ennis is still with me. She's been with me throughout the morning here. Should popes quit? What do you think? 0500 909 693. People who feel very strongly that yes, the time is right for a pope to quit. The time is right for a pope to take responsibility for what they perceive to be failings in the way the Catholic Church in particular has handled the aftermath of the child abuse scandal. What do you think? 0500 909 693. Professor Breda will come to you in just a moment. Before that, we have other matters of international importance to address. It's 9:25. It's 10:25 here in Rome this morning. We're asking the question just outside the apartment of Pope Benedict XVI as we stand at the moment, right in Vatican City. Should popes quit? Quick thought from Professor Breda Ennis, who knows as much about this as anyone. Should popes quit?
If they want to, why not? It's as simple as that. Because
it's taken 600 years, though. Yeah. For another pope to decide since the last one.
Well, if people, if they feel that people this pope is not modern, more modern than this you can't get.
Why is that? What do you say?
Revolutionary, because it also takes an awful lot of courage to do what he's just done. And also a lot of self-knowledge, knowing what his limits are, because most people don't know what their limits are. So I think it's a good lesson in introversion for people. And also this Pope is the Pope of silence. He tends to be judged by the things he does. He's not the type of Pope who is a theatrical performer, who can show off in any way, and he's not interested in doing that either. So but the fact that he followed the last Pope it's clear to me that he didn't have any problem following a Pope like John Paul II, because he is a secure personality, and only a secure personality like this would make the kind of decision which is quite revolutionary.
Most people don't know what their limitations are. It's an interesting thought. We've got Phil and Greg here who are in Rome. Good morning.
Good morning. Good
Enjoying
morning.
your trip?
Yes, we are. Very much so, yeah.
And what is the purpose of your visit?
It's purely for a holiday, a brief break from London, and first time I've been to Rome, had a look at the sites, etc.
So when you heard the news that the Pope was intending to resign, did it have any major impact on you?
I wouldn't say a major impact. It was a bit of a shock, but I'm sure that shocked the rest of the world, really, isn't it? They don't normally resign, do they? They normally die in power, don't they?
Right decision, do you think?
I think that it's a very, very brave decision. I think that the very fact that he's resigned because he feels he's no longer going to be capable of carrying out the job that he's employed to do, I think he's very, very brave and pretty accurate, to be honest. A lot of the previous popes obviously have died in office and been very, very frail, so I think the fact that he feels to go now while he's still capable of doing the job but won't be in the future is the right decision, yes.
And any thoughts on challenges for his successor?
Well, obviously I'd like to put my name into the hat, but I'm not too sure I could get away with it, really.
Are you a baptised Catholic?
Of course not, no.
Right, I think that's the major stumbling block. I don't want to delve too much further in your CV to find any others. Thank you to both of you.
Thank you very much.
Nice to meet you, Phil and Greg, who are here in Rome this morning. Let's talk to Michael in Exeter. Good morning, Michael.
Good morning. Good morning.
Nice to hear from you. What is your position on this? Do you think Pope should quit?
I don't think popes should quit, no, because as a servant of God, you serve God all your life. And let's look at the fact Jesus served right up to his dying days on the cross, when he said to the thief on the cross, "You will be in heaven tonight." So no, I feel he should carry on until he sadly leaves this earth. And as far as judging him for it, I don't believe we should judge him for him resigning, because if you read the Bible as I do on a regular basis, we shall not judge people, or we will be judged as severely. So no, I do not think he should resign. He should carry on serving God until such time he will not be here and he will return to heaven. That's basically my thoughts on the situation, really.
Well, Michael, stay with us. Austin Ivory, I think, is still here too.
Can I respond to that, Rachel? I mean,
of course you can.
In terms of service, he will carry on serving the church, but he'll carry on doing it as a priest and in a life of prayer. Look, the papacy is an office, and the bishop is an office, and a priest may serve in his life a number of different offices. He could be a bishop, and indeed occasionally he could be a pope. He becomes a pope and then he can cease to be a pope. That's provided for in church law, it's provided for in the theology of the church, and to renounce the papacy as the Pope has just done, thinking of the good of the church, in no way implies that he's serving the church less. You can argue he's serving it more.
Yes, but he is God's representative on earth, and he should be fulfilling that role as serving God. He's the intermediary between his parishioners and God. They go to him, and he sends a message to God. So,
but he remains a priest. He remains a priest. I think what you're talking about there is the priesthood, really, and of course he remains a priest.
Well, I just feel like he's in a good position to do good in the world, although he's getting old and he's not very well. I mean, Jesus served his parishioners right up to his dying days on the cross. He knew that was his destiny,
Michael,
to serve God all his life.
Michael, thank you very much. That's Michael in Exeter, and Austin Ivory as well from Catholic Voices. Thank you. Should popes quit? What do you think? Does this have an impact on your life? 0500 909 693. Give me a call. You can tweet as well at BBC 5 Live. Good morning, it's your call live from Rome this morning, standing in St Peter's Square. It's a picture postcard day, a perfect picture postcard day here in St Peter's Square. The sun is out, the sky is blue, the ice creams are on sale. The place is humming with packs of tourists here, and it's a great international congregation actually of people coming to visit Rome, not because they're Catholic necessarily, but because as an historic city it's absolutely beautiful, and its place in history is fascinating. Also this morning they are jostling in between the huge satellite trucks of the television stations here, which all descended here on St Peter's Square yesterday following the shocking news. Really, nobody was expecting it. Not most people weren't expecting it. Apparently one or two insiders close to the Pope himself were perhaps aware of what was going on, but the Pope Benedict XVI had decided to resign. So the question is, was that the right decision? Should popes step down? What do you think? 0500 909 693. Bert and Sophia here, as if to illustrate the sort of international nature of this discussion, from Belgium on their first trip to Rome. How are you finding it, Bert?
Fine. It's a lovely day today.
Are you impressed by what you've seen? You're a Catholic but not a practicing Catholic.
Yes, that's correct.
So the news that the Pope intends to resign, did it have much of an impact on you?
For me, not, but I think it's a wise decision because if you're too old for a job, I think it's wise to get a step down.
And what would you like to see or hear, or what kind of direction would you like the Church to take from a new Pope?
I think it's good that we will have a more modern Pope now that is for contraception and a good perspective for a gay community, and yes.
So addressing these sorts of kind of big global issues, perhaps.
Yes.
Well, Bert, thank you very much for talking to us. Enjoy the rest of your break with Sophie as well. All the best. Thank you very much. Let's talk to Michael Walsh now. Morning, Michael.
Good morning.
Nice to hear from you. Michael Walsh is author of books about popes, including Pope John Paul, a biography. What's your instinct on this issue? Were you surprised? Do you think Pope Benedict has made a wise decision?
Well, you've asked me two questions. Was I surprised, and has he made the right decision? So the answer to the first is I was absolutely stunned. The reason why I was stunned was not because I didn't expect him to resign. I rather thought he might. I'm not a Vatican insider in a position to know these things, but there's a strong rumour, that he had advised John Paul II to resign, to consider resignation. Anyway, not advise him to resign, to consider resignation. And John Paul II, we know now, because after his last will and testament was published, we know now that he did actually consider resigning. So I thought to myself, as somebody who was recommended to his predecessor that he might consider resigning, might himself consider resigning. So in one sense I shouldn't have been surprised, but then I was, and I was surprised because I know that plans have been made for the Pope's travels well into 2014. So I thought, oh well, he's not going to resign, and lo and behold, he has. So I was pretty stunned.
Is there any more to this than meets the eye? Perhaps some of the Italian newspapers here are speculating about the politics within the Vatican, that maybe he met some opposition from other cardinals for his plans to reform the church. There is also the suggestion that perhaps we are going to hear more details about his state of health, whether there might be something more serious there that we haven't been told about. What do you think?
Well, I heard again entirely a rumour from one of your distantly from one of your own correspondents that his state of health is slightly worse than would appear. It seems to be pretty bad actually. You know that he's sort of can't walk down the aisle of St Peter's. He's pushed down in a trolley these days. So clearly he's getting a bit doddery. I think about I wouldn't trust Italian newspapers. They love gossip. The Vatican is a very gossipy place. Clearly, the Vatican administration, the Roman Curia, is a pretty dysfunctional organisation. We know that very well because his own butler, the Pope's own butler, and who would have thought the Pope had a butler? The Pope's own butler been removing these letters from the papal office, and they were eventually published in the book about a year ago, about 12 months ago. So we know that it was pretty dysfunctional, and when Benedict XVI, when Joseph Ratzinger was chosen, some of us thought that one of the reasons for the Cardinal's choice was that he was a curial official, but thought of as somebody who was a bit of an outsider to all the politics of the Vatican, and we thought that he might have been brought in to reform the Roman Curia. Well, he didn't do that, and it's pretty evident the Roman Curia does need reforming, and from the Vatican Bank downwards or upwards or sideways anyway, it all needs it needs a good reform, a good burst of modernization. I mean, it's a Renaissance court, and it's really out of keeping with the way the world works these days.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I just want to get the thoughts of a couple of callers, if I may, okay. Michael. Rob is in Newcastle and Jane is in Bristol. Morning, Rob and Jane. Rob, start us off here. Do you think the Pope is right to resign, Rob?
Hi. To be honest, I think it's an irrelevance who takes over, because the problem I see is that you have an organisation here which is up to its chin in scandal. Child sex abuse, effectively white slavery in Ireland, with the Magdalen laundries. It amazes me to hear anybody talk about, it serving God, or, in any way holding the moral high ground. There's just so many things. To pick up on a point that Mr. Ivory made before, he said that when the Pope was in his position where he was investigating child sex abuse, he said they were investigating hundreds of claims per week. I mean, that just gives an idea of the scale of this, really, and that came. This is coming from the mouth of somebody who's got a deep connection to the Catholic Church as a journalist. And I just find it absolutely incredible, really, that they can talk about, serving God, or, having the moral high ground when the entire thing seems to be a rank hypocrisy from top to bottom.
Jane in Bristol, what do you think?
Rachel, if I could answer that point about, to say if the sleaze and everything else, if they all resigned, we'd have nobody, would we? But I must say, His Holiness, I think he's made the right decision, because we don't know what state his health is in, and he has been looking frail, and he's leading, is it 1 billion something Catholics? And
1.3 billion Catholics worldwide.
Yes. And he's got to be up to speed. We don't want him falling asleep on the dais, and when he's saying Mass, having to be, get a nudge and to wake him up like in the House of Lords now, where they're sleeping on the benches. You can't have that, Rachel. I was brought up with Pope Pius XII. Well, I knew nothing, didn't know much about him, apart from the fact he'd be mentioned in church, in Mass, at Mass on a Sunday. But now they've cameras stuck in their faces, the media, of course. We love you doing your job. We can't get enough of you, Rachel. But to say, all these things are precious, and we don't know if the gay marriage, if that affected him, think, oh well, we don't know what it is. But I think he's very brave, because the majority of them hold on to power no matter what the situation is, and I think it's brave of His Holiness he must have thought about it. He's a very intelligent man, and he wouldn't just take the step lightly.
A brave decision, wouldn't have taken the step lightly. Let's talk to Paul in Brighton. Should popes quit? Paul, what do you think?
Hello, Rachel. Good morning. Hello. Morning. Yes, I think he should quit. He's not up to the battle that's ahead of us. I'm a Catholic, and I think we're at that point where Christianity is either going to win or lose and disappear totally, because religion is for sinners. That's where you go when you want to repent. That's not where you go when you want to change religion to conform to your views. You go there to repent. So the church should be full now, because the sinning is at a peak. And I think that we need somebody who believes in the Bible. The Bible's there. It's not to be changed. We perhaps should sort out what is man-made in the Roman Catholic religion and what is not. If you follow the Bible and what Jesus actually said, it's a very small part of the Bible. So perhaps priests should be allowed to marry. I think that'd be a good move. I don't think that's not God-made rule. I think that, I always ask the question, who are these people who infiltrated the Roman Catholic faith to commit child abuse. Who were they? I mean, they weren't the Catholic faith. They were people who went in there and hid in there. And that should be sorted out. But don't bring the church down because of that. You know,
there are important issues. I don't know if, Rob, you want to come back into this, though, but if you talk about the church...
I just find it incredible to kind of pass the book, that it's somehow, you know, an evil outside influence that has somehow come in and corrupted the church. I mean, these abuses have been going on for generations. And, you know, they still work when people ignore them.
I'm not saying ignore it, but it's still the fact that they infiltrated the church. They couldn't have been, a real Roman Catholics. They couldn't have been religious people to commit those crimes. They should have been there. They should be there now.
So in that sense, the apparatus that was set up to, for example, put girls in Ireland into effectively white slavery in the Magdalene laundries wasn't institutionalized.
But God didn't make these rules. Didn't make these things happen.
This is the big
get real.
I think at its very heart, and if you certainly look at its history, you'll find that the Catholic Church is one great big man-made creation.
No rubbish. You can't say that. You're just saying what man has done to that religion. That's a different issue.
Then, unless God actually says, you know, it comes down and speaks to us and tells us the right way, I think, you know, you've got no chance.
No, you look. You have freedom of movement while you're alive. You can do what you like while you're on this earth. God doesn't interfere with that. That's quite clearly said. You know, do unto Caesar what is his. In other words, you're saying do what you like while you're here, but you know, when you're not here anymore, when you're on your deathbed, that's the time when you've got to think about your actions.
I think you perhaps need to
Rob,
look
thank you very much.
You might find that out.
And Paul, and in Brighton, well, I'm sure you would. Thank you very much to you, Jane in Bristol as well. Thank you to you. 0500 909 693. Should popes quit? And what do you think will happen next in the Catholic Church? What do you think should happen next in the Catholic Church? Do let me know. Here's Michelle with the travel. Yes, 10:52. Sorry, it's 9:52. I keep saying 10:52. 10:52 in Rome as the man selling the tickets for the sightseeing tour goes past me on his funny little Segway two-wheel thing. Loads and loads of tourists milling around here this morning, in amongst, of course, the international journalists as well here, gathering reaction to the news that Pope Benedict XVI intends to resign. So the question is, should popes quit? What do you think? 0500 909 693. Mark in Birmingham. Good morning, Mark.
Hi, Rachel.
And Jane in Bolton as well. Let me bring you in as well. Sorry, Mark.
Yep.
Morning, Jane.
Hi, good morning. Good morning.
Hello. Right, fire ahead, Mark.
Well, I was going to say, firstly, do you need an assistant when you go on these lovely trips?
I do have a man who's pressing the buttons here beside me.
Well, I could be your man.
It's a little bit more complicated than just magically holding a microphone in front of your face and talking.
Okay.
Yes, go on. Anyway.
Right. I'm not a Roman Catholic, but I'm actually really glad he's resigned, because I was really uncomfortable seeing John Paul II towards the end of his life. I felt it I thought it damaged the church, how he was sort of kept there. So I'm actually really glad he's made that choice.
Because he was very physically frail by the end of his papacy, wasn't he?
And also, I mean, at the end of the day, what he does is a job, and it's a very big job. And I'm sure for, I don't know, the last 3, 4, 5 years of John Paul II's life, he wasn't doing most of that job. So, obviously, there's been talk that the resignation has to be done of his own free will and things. So if he had, the problem with that is if he had said, I want to continue, they couldn't then remove him. But
potentially you're saying if somebody is in the job for too long, it could undermine the integrity and the credibility of their position.
As I said, it just made me feel uncomfortable seeing how ill he was, but he was still there. And I mean, as far as the new Pope is concerned, I think they've got to go before. I'm not sure how old the youngest cardinal is, but I think they've got to go for one of as young as they can, purely because it would be less likely that they've been embroiled in any of the sex abuse allegations in any way.
Okay, I think the youngest cardinal who's one of the contenders is around about 63 years old. But
right,
check that for you, Jane in Bolton. Jane, hi. What do you think, Jane?
Yeah, well, I just think this morning's discussion is why you should never discuss religion over dinner, because it's many people's interpretation of the Bible and things that happen in different ways. And I know about the scandals and things, but you can't pull the whole church down for that. And Christianity will never die. On the specific issue of the Pope, he must have agonised over his decision. He must have been in absolute torment. But Christianity as a whole and the Catholic Church are facing many, many demands at the moment. And if he doesn't feel capable to meet those demands and lead the Church forward in God's name, then he's made the correct decision to step down. But I think
but it's fascinating to have these discussions, Jane, and we're always grateful that people do come and talk to it, because people have very passionately held beliefs about it, be it in favour of what the church is doing or otherwise. We have Christopher Lamb also with us, who's an assistant editor of the Catholic newspaper The Tablet. Good morning, Christopher. I guess the discussion has brought up all sorts of issues that you might well expect, that there are people who feel strongly that the role of the Pope is in effect an irrelevance, and perhaps that he needs to be held to account for what is perceived to be his failings in dealing with some of the challenges in the Catholic Church, but other people who support his decision, who like Jane believe he must really have agonised over it. What is your view, Christopher?
Well, good morning. I think to answer the question whether the Pope is relevant or not, well, the very fact that we're having this discussion now, and the fact that the world's media have descended on Rome and to cover this story shows, I think, that the Pope is relevant. I think the Pope is one of the few international moral leaders on the world stage. So I think certainly the Pope is relevant. On the question of sex abuse, I mean, it's been a huge scandal across the Catholic Church internationally. I mean, this Pope has taken steps to try and deal with this problem. It wasn't simply a question of priests abusing, it was also a question of how the Church dealt with the allegations of abuse, and that was what he was trying to grapple with when he was Cardinal Ratzinger, when he was Pope, trying to set in place procedures. Now, you've got a church of 1 billion people. That takes a bit of time, and it's pretty difficult to do. So I think he's grappled with it. Could he have done more? Well, I think everyone in the church would say that more could have been done.
And do you think, Christopher, was he right to resign when he did? Were you shocked?
Yeah, I was shocked. I was shocked. But he had said in an interview, a book-length interview with a German journalist, that yet if a pope felt he couldn't continue, it wouldn't just be right for him to resign. It would be he would be duty-bound to resign. I think this pope saw John Paul II very ill and frail as Pope, and I think he saw that firsthand. I think he felt he didn't want to do that. He didn't want to do that himself. Yeah. I think particularly the how he felt mentally. If there was any question of whether his mental faculties would go, it would be wrong for him to be Pope and to have his faculties leaving him.
Okay, many thanks. That's Christopher Lamb. Quick word from Roger in Dyffryn Dydw in Wales. Good morning, Roger.
Good morning. Just a quick one. Sorry. Have a nice day out there. We went to Rome once and it's beautiful. We hope to go back again. Anyway, at the end of the day, it's a job. It's what it boils down to. We all leave school. You either go into being religious or I was a carpenter. You went into the radio and everything. He went into religion. And religion is there. It always has been, to put the fear of God into people. You went into it because you wanted to step higher up the ladder. I'd love to be a fly on the wall in the Vatican now to see the intrigue that's going on. It must be fantastic to see who they're going to pick for the next one.
As we heard from our contributor. As we heard from our contributor earlier, they love intrigue, they love gossip in the Vatican. Who knows, Rog? Thanks ever so much for finishing things off for us. Thank you to everyone for your calls and your contributions this morning. Back from 6 o'clock tomorrow morning. Victoria's coming next. Good morning from Rome. We'll see you soon. the Vatican should proceed from here? How do you respond to this? Is it the right decision? Should popes quit? 0500 909 693. Do give me a call on this morning. Lots of people already to talk to about it. We begin with Austin Ivory, who is Director of Catholic Voices. Morning, Austin.
Good morning.
Very nice to have you with us. And Matt in Derby as well, and Tony in Preston. Morning, Matt and Tony.
Good morning. Hello.
Thank you for calling in. Austin Ivory, first of all, from your perspective, do you think that Pope Benedict XVI has made the right decision?
I do. I think it was a brave and a correct decision. He rightly perceives that the modern papacy demands a lot of global travel. In an age of global media, you need to be responsive to crises as they develop.
Basilica this morning, majestic with the blue sky behind it. Crowds of tourists now here thronging in front of the Basilica. Lots of television trucks and journalists around as well, gathering here, collecting response to the news that Pope Benedict XVI says he intends to resign. This will officially happen on February the 28th, but not that far from where I am standing now. He is presumably waking up, having his breakfast, reading over the papers. He reads the papers every morning, we are told, looking at some of the reaction to this news, perhaps contemplating what his life will be like now, having resigned the papacy, the first pope to do so in 600 years, and many people saying this is a very significant moment for the Catholic Church. Old man, or by its very nature, does the role require a degree of suffering, self-sacrifice? He is regarded as God's ordained on earth. Has he done a good job as Pope, or do scandals in the Church, child abuse, VatiLeaks, make this the right time for him to go? Should popes quit? Give me a call, 0500 909 693. You can tweet us as well at BBC 5 Live. You are with 5 Live from the BBC. I'm Rachel Hodges has the news. Good morning. You're listening to BBC Radio 5 Live. It's your call. It's around about 6 minutes past 10 here in Rome, 6 minutes past 9 back in the UK. I'm standing right in the heart of Vatican City in St Peter's Square, looking across to St Peter's Basilica for the papacy, and could have implications for the 1 billion Catholics, baptised Catholics right around the world. But to many people, it will matter very little at all. And the question for you this morning is, should popes quit? What do you think? Do you think he's had a degree of foresight here to recognise that his time has come, that he has been as of much use as he can be, that his physical and mental health is now really an impairment to him getting on and doing the job properly? Or do you see the role slightly differently? Do you think that perhaps even the fact that it's almost like any other job, if you resign, can you be sacked, that it demythologises the whole role of the Pope, the mysticism surrounding him? Is it a complete irrelevance to you? How do you think? I think we might just have time to find to get a full rundown of the runners and riders from Breda before we let her go. Anyway, it's 9 o'clock. This is Rachel Burden, live from St Peter's Square in Vatican City in Rome, and this is your call. Should popes quit? Pope Benedict says he doesn't have the strength of mind and body to continue in the job. He's become the first pope in 600 years and only the second ever to resign the post. The former Archbishop of Westminster, Cardinal Cormac Murphy O'Connor, says it is the right call.
So it's a very brave decision to do something new after, as you rightly said, 600 years. It's a very, very brave decision to take. And it's become much more demanding, I think, over the past 30, 40 years.
Is this a pragmatic decision by an